She waters her roses every morning at 8. She bakes cookies for the neighborhood children. She waves politely at passing strangers. Eleanor Hartwick is 72 years old, living in a charming cottage in Asheville, North Carolina. But what if I told you that this gentle grandmother was once the most dangerous weapon the CIA ever created? What if the woman serving lemonade on her porch once had the power to terminate targets with surgical precision, her brain connected to classified technology that made her more machine than human? This isn't science fiction. This is the story of Project Nightingale, a program so classified that even today, most government officials will deny it ever existed. Eleanor wasn't just trained to kill, she was engineered for it. Neural implants, emotional suppression, missions so deadly that failure meant instant termination. For 2 decades, she operated in the shadows of the Cold War, a human drone executing orders without question, without mercy, without hesitation. But programs like hers don't just end. Agents like her don't simply retire. They're decommissioned. And that process is more terrifying than any mission she ever completed. Now, decades later, someone has discovered her secret. Someone wants to ensure that no evidence of Project Nightingale survives. And Eleanor must make an impossible choice: disappear forever, or fight back with skills she swore she'd never use again. How does a woman transform from a lethal government weapon into a neighbor who feeds stray cats? And more importantly, can she ever truly escape what she was designed to be? Eleanor Hartwick's hands moved with practiced precision as she trimmed the lavender in her front garden. The morning sun cast long shadows across her property on Montford Avenue, one of Asheville's most picturesque streets. Victorian homes lined the boulevard, their painted facades glowing in shades of mint green, butter yellow, and soft coral. The Blue Ridge Mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks still dusted with the last remnants of winter snow, even though spring had firmly taken hold in the valley below. Asheville was the perfect place to disappear. A city of artists, retirees, and tourists seeking craft beer and mountain air. Population just under 90,000. Large enough to blend in, small enough to feel safe. Eleanor had chosen it carefully 23 years ago, when she'd been given her new identity, her new life, her new purpose, to be ordinary. And she had succeeded brilliantly. Her neighbors knew her as a widow who'd moved from Virginia after her husband passed. They knew she volunteered at the public library on Tuesday mornings. They knew she made exceptional blackberry jam and shared it generously. What they didn't know, what they could never know, was that Eleanor Hartwick had once infiltrated the Kremlin, eliminated 3 high-value targets in East Berlin, and possessed technology inside her skull that was still decades ahead of anything publicly available. "Morning, Eleanor," called Patricia Chen from across the street, walking her golden retriever. "Good morning, Patricia. Beautiful day, isn't it?" Eleanor's voice was warm, genuine. She'd learned how to mimic normal human interaction so well that even she sometimes forgot it was a learned behavior. Patricia waved and continued down the street. Eleanor returned to her lavender, but her hands had stilled. There was a car parked 3 houses down that hadn't been there yesterday, a dark sedan. Nothing remarkable about it, except that it was positioned with a clear line of sight to her front door. The windows were slightly tinted, not enough to be suspicious, but enough to obscure the occupants. Eleanor's pulse didn't quicken. That particular biological response had been muted by her modifications. But something deep in her neural network, something that wasn't quite machine and wasn't quite human, registered the anomaly. She continued trimming the lavender, her movements unhurried, her expression pleasant. Inside her mind, however, calculations were already forming. Distance to the vehicle, 47 meters. Probable occupants, 2, based on weight distribution. Purpose, surveillance, not assault. If they'd wanted her dead, she'd already be dead. Eleanor gathered her gardening tools and walked back inside her cottage. The interior was exactly what you'd expect from a 72-year-old woman living alone. Floral curtains, comfortable furniture, photographs on the mantel showing a life that had never happened, a wedding to a man she'd never married, children she'd never raised, vacations to places she'd never visited. The CIA's legend crafting department had done excellent work. She made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, positioned so she could observe the sedan without being obvious. The vehicle didn't move. An hour passed. then another. Finally, around noon, the sedan's engine started, and it pulled away slowly, deliberately. They wanted her to know she'd been watched. Eleanor's tea had gone cold in her hands. That evening, she retrieved her mail from the box at the end of her driveway. Between a grocery store circular and a charity solicitation, there was an unmarked manila envelope. No return address, no postage. Hand-delivered. Her fingers traced the edge of the envelope. The paper quality was government grade. She carried it inside, placed it on her kitchen table, and stared at it for a full 10 minutes before opening it. Inside was a single photograph and a playing card. The photograph showed a man in his early 50s, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. He was exiting a coffee shop in what looked like Seattle. The man's face was unremarkable, the kind you'd forget moments after passing him on the street. But Eleanor knew that face. She'd known it when it belonged to a 26-year-old recruit with brilliant eyes and steady hands, Marcus Sullivan. Codename Falcon, Project Nightingale operative. Her partner on 7 missions. The only person who'd ever made her feel something approximating human emotion, despite the neural dampeners. The playing card was the Queen of Spades. In the symbology of Project Nightingale, the Queen of Spades meant one thing: terminated. Eleanor's hands didn't tremble. They couldn't, not with the stabilizers embedded in her nervous system, but something in her chest constricted. Marcus was dead, and someone had sent her proof. She turned the photograph over. On the back, written in precise block letters, was a message. 12 remain. You're next. Remember Protocol Omega. Eleanor sat in her quiet kitchen as the sun set over the Blue Ridge Mountains, casting the room in shades of amber and shadow. For 23 years, she'd been Eleanor Hartwick, retired widow, lover of gardens and library books. But that life, that carefully constructed illusion had just shattered. Protocol Omega. The words alone were enough to resurrect everything she'd buried. She stood, moved to her bedroom, and pulled aside the area rug near her closet. Beneath a loose floorboard was a metal case, sealed and untouched for more than 2 decades. Her fingers entered the combination, a sequence she'd never forgotten, could never forget, because it was hardwired into her memory centers. Inside the case was a phone, outdated by modern standards, but built on secure architecture that still functioned. She powered it on and waited. After 30 seconds, the screen illuminated with a single encrypted contact. Eleanor hesitated. Making this call meant abandoning everything she'd built. It meant stepping back into a world of shadows and violence. It meant becoming what she'd spent 2 decades trying to forget. But Marcus was dead. And if Protocol Omega had been activated, that meant someone was systematically eliminating every surviving member of Project Nightingale. She pressed dial. The line rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, female, young, efficient. Authentication required. Eleanor spoke in a language she hadn't used in years, a cipher constructed specifically for Nightingale operatives. Sparrow 7 Delta. Emergency reactivation request. There was a pause. Then, Sparrow 7 Delta confirmed. Stand by. Another pause, longer this time. Then a different voice came on the line. This one was older, male, carrying the weight of authority and exhaustion. Eleanor, I was hoping I'd never hear from you again. Director Carlyle. She used his title, not his name. I received a message. Protocol Omega. Is it real? The silence on the other end told her everything she needed to know before he spoke. Come to Langley. We'll talk in person. And Eleanor, don't trust anyone, not even the people who helped you disappear. The line went dead. Eleanor stood in her bedroom, the phone still in her hand, and looked at her reflection in the dresser mirror. The face staring back was lined with age, soft with years of peaceful living. But beneath that face, beneath the skin and bone, circuitry hummed. Neural networks that had never been fully deactivated pulsed with dormant potential. Her eyes, pale blue and kind in the evening light, flickered almost imperceptibly as deeper systems began powering up. She wasn't Eleanor Hartwick anymore. She was Sparrow 7 Delta, and someone was going to pay for Marcus's death. If you want to know what happens next, make sure to subscribe to this channel, leave a like, drop a comment below and share this video with someone who loves incredible stories. Because what Eleanor discovers next will change everything you thought you knew about loyalty, betrayal and the true cost of serving your country. Washington, D.C., 1982. The Cold War was at its frozen peak, and paranoia was the currency of power. Eleanor wasn't Eleanor then. She was Margaret Hayes, a 28-year-old linguistics specialist working at the Defense Intelligence Agency. She spoke 7 languages fluently, could crack Soviet code systems faster than anyone in her department, and had a security clearance that gave her access to secrets that would terrify ordinary citizens. The city itself was a study in contrasts. The gleaming monuments and marble government buildings stood as testaments to American ideals, while beneath that polished surface, an invisible war raged every single day. Dead drops in Georgetown, safe houses in Alexandria, surveillance teams following Soviet diplomats through the streets of Embassy Row. Margaret loved the work. She was brilliant at it. And that brilliance made her a target for something far darker than routine espionage. The recruitment happened on a Tuesday evening in November. She'd been working late, analyzing intercepted communications from the Soviet embassy, when her supervisor appeared in her cubicle doorway. "Hayes, pack up. You have a meeting." "Now? It's almost 8 o'clock. Now." 20 minutes later, she was sitting in a conference room deep in the bowels of the CIA headquarters building in Langley, Virginia. The room had no windows. The walls were lined with sound-dampening panels. And sitting across from her were 3 people who would change her life forever. The man in the center spoke first. He was in his 50s, silver-haired, with the kind of face that revealed nothing. "Miss Hayes, everything you're about to hear is classified at a level above top secret. You cannot discuss this meeting with anyone, ever, regardless of whether you accept our offer. Do you understand?" Margaret nodded. Her heart was racing, but her voice was steady. "I understand." "Good. My name is Director Thomas Carlyle. I oversee a program called Nightingale. Have you heard of it?" "No, sir." "No. You wouldn't have. It doesn't officially exist." He slid a folder across the table. "Open it." Inside were photographs of people, men and women ranging from their 20s to 40s. Beneath each photo was a code name and a brief description: Falcon, Raven, Hawk, Owl. Each description was terrifyingly similar. Eliminated high-value target in Moscow. Infiltrated KGB headquarters. Prevented nuclear incident in Prague. Margaret looked up. "These are your agents." They were more than agents. Carlyle leaned forward. "Miss Hayes, we're losing the Cold War, not publicly, not obviously, but slowly, methodically, we're being outmaneuvered. The Soviets have sleeper agents embedded so deeply in our government that we can't root them out through conventional means. They're developing weapons technologies that could render our entire nuclear arsenal obsolete, and they're doing it faster than we can respond. So you need better intelligence. We need better agents, faster, stronger, smarter, agents who can't be compromised by fear or loyalty conflicts or moral hesitation." He paused. "We need agents who are as much machine as they are human." The woman to Carlyle's left spoke next. She was younger, perhaps 40, with sharp eyes and a white lab coat. "I'm Dr. Helen Vasquez, Chief Neurological Engineer for Project Nightingale. What we're proposing is revolutionary. We've developed neural implant technology that can enhance cognitive function by 300%, improve physical reaction time to superhuman levels, and suppress emotional responses that interfere with mission completion." Margaret felt her mouth go dry. "You want to put computers in people's brains." "Not computers, augmentation systems. Think of it as giving a surgeon better tools. You'd still be you, just a vastly superior version." The third person at the table, a man in his 30s with cold eyes, finally spoke. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Kowalski. I run tactical operations for Nightingale. I've worked with 12 operatives so far. Every single one has performed beyond our most optimistic projections. They've prevented 2 assassination attempts on the president, stopped a Soviet plan to sabotage NATO command infrastructure, and eliminated threats that would have started World War III. Margaret looked at the photographs again. Young faces, determined faces. What happened to them? Some are still active, some retired, some... Carlyle hesitated. The work is dangerous. We've lost 3 operatives in the field. And the implants? Are they safe? Dr. Vasquez answered carefully. The technology is experimental. There are risks. Neurological integration takes 6 months. The process is painful. Some candidates don't survive it, but for those who do, the results are extraordinary. Margaret closed the folder. Every rational part of her mind screamed that this was insane. But another part, the part that had spent years analyzing threats, that understood how close the world teetered on the edge of annihilation, recognized the terrible necessity. Why me? Because you're perfect, Carlyle said simply. High intelligence, exceptional pattern recognition, psychological profile shows remarkable stress tolerance and moral flexibility. You're exactly what we need. And if I say no? You go back to your desk. We never speak again. But you'll know that you could have made a difference. You could have saved thousands, maybe millions of lives. And you chose not to. Margaret sat in that soundproofed room, looking at the faces of operatives who'd become something more than human to fight an invisible war. She thought about her parents in Ohio, who believed she worked a boring desk job. She thought about the boyfriend she'd recently broken up with because he couldn't understand why she worked such long hours. She thought about the Soviet agents plotting in the shadows, about nuclear weapons pointed at American cities, about the fragile peace that could shatter at any moment. If I do this, she said slowly, I want full mission details. I want to know exactly what you're asking me to do. Carlyle smiled. It wasn't a warm expression. If you do this, Margaret Hayes will disappear. You'll be given a new identity. You'll undergo 6 months of surgical modification and psychological conditioning. You'll be assigned missions that will test everything you believe about right and wrong. And if you survive, if you succeed, no one will ever know your name or thank you for your service. But I'll make a difference. You'll save the world, multiple times, and no one will ever know. Margaret Hayes took a breath. When do we start? 3 days later, she was transferred to a classified facility hidden in the Virginia mountains. The complex was underground, carved from solid rock, accessible only through a tunnel system that required 3 separate security checkpoints. Inside, it looked like something between a hospital and a research laboratory. Dr. Vasquez met her in the medical wing. The process begins with baseline mapping. We need to understand your neural architecture completely before we can integrate the implants. It's painless, but it takes about 48 hours. Margaret lay in a scanning chamber while machines hummed and whirred around her. Technicians studied displays showing the intricate pathways of her brain in 3-dimensional detail. When it was finished, Dr. Vasquez showed her the results. You have exceptional neural density in your prefrontal cortex and language centers. That's good. It means you'll integrate the cognitive enhancement systems quickly. Your amygdala shows normal activity patterns, which is actually what we want. The implants will modulate emotional responses, but we need that baseline humanity to maintain operational judgment. How does it work exactly? The implants are nano-constructed networks that interface directly with your neural pathways. Think of them as a secondary nervous system that enhances and stabilizes your primary one. You'll think faster, react quicker, remember everything with perfect clarity. Physical modifications will come later. Muscular enhancement, sensory augmentation, metabolic optimization. And the emotional suppression? Dr. Vasquez's expression became more guarded. That's the most controversial element. In field situations, emotions can be fatal. Fear causes hesitation. Empathy compromises decisions. The implants include a system we call the emotional regulator. It doesn't eliminate feelings, it contextualizes them, filters them, allows you to function optimally even in extreme situations. It makes you a psychopath. It makes you effective. Dr. Vasquez held her gaze. Margaret, the people you'll be fighting don't have the luxury of conscience. They'll torture, kill, destroy without hesitation. If you're going to stop them, you need to be able to operate on their level. The surgery happened in stages over 6 months. Each procedure pushed Margaret's body and mind further from baseline humanity. The neural implants came first. Thousands of microscopic filaments threaded through her brain tissue, interfacing with specific regions. The pain was indescribable. For 3 weeks she experienced headaches so severe that she begged them to reverse the procedure. But gradually, the pain faded, and something extraordinary took its place. She could think with crystalline clarity. Complex problems that would have taken hours to solve now unraveled in minutes. She could recall every detail of every conversation, every document she'd ever read, every face she'd ever seen. Her reaction time improved so dramatically that she could catch objects thrown at her before her conscious mind even registered the movement. The physical modifications came next. Her muscular system was enhanced with synthetic fibers that doubled her strength. Her cardiovascular system was optimized for peak endurance. Her sensory systems were augmented. She could hear conversations from 100 feet away, see clearly in near-total darkness, detect subtle changes in air pressure that indicated hidden passages or approaching threats. And then came the emotional regulator. Dr. Vasquez sat with her before the final procedure. "This is the point of no return, Margaret. Once we activate the regulator, you'll still have emotions, but they'll be manageable, distant, like watching yourself feel things rather than experiencing them directly." Will I still be me? That's the question no one can answer. The operatives we've asked say yes. They feel like enhanced versions of themselves. But some of their family members, before we separated them, said it was like talking to a stranger wearing a familiar face. Margaret thought about that. I don't have much family. Maybe that makes it easier. Maybe it does. The emotional regulator was activated on a cold February morning. Margaret was sitting in a comfortable chair, electrodes attached to her skull, while technicians monitored her neural activity. Dr. Vasquez gave the command, and the system powered up. Margaret felt different. Not numb exactly, but distant, like her emotions had been moved behind glass. She could see them, acknowledge them, but they couldn't touch her with the same intensity. Dr. Vasquez showed her photographs designed to evoke emotional responses: a child laughing, a car accident victim, a romantic sunset, a scene of war devastation. Margaret looked at each image and understood intellectually what she should feel, but the actual feelings were muted, manageable, utterly under her control. "How do you feel?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "Capable," Margaret said. It was the truest answer she had. The training began immediately. Hand-to-hand combat, weapons proficiency, infiltration techniques, interrogation, counter-interrogation, poison identification, lock-picking, demolitions, languages, codes. Every skill a perfect agent would need, drilled into her enhanced mind and body until they became automatic. And then, 6 months after Margaret Hayes entered the facility, someone new emerged. Sparrow 7 Delta. Her first mission briefing came from Director Carlyle himself. "We have a Soviet defector attempting to reach the West through East Berlin. He has information about a mole in the State Department, someone with access to our nuclear response protocols. Your job is to extract him, get the information, and eliminate any pursuit." It sounded simple. It wasn't. Margaret, now Sparrow, infiltrated East Berlin through a tunnel system beneath the wall. The city was a nightmare of surveillance and paranoia, Soviet agents and Stasi officers on every corner. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, and she'd be captured, interrogated, executed. But she didn't hesitate. The defector was a physicist named Yuri Volkov, hiding in an abandoned factory near Alexanderplatz. When Sparrow found him, he was terrified, certain he'd been betrayed. "You're American?" he whispered in Russian. "I'm here to get you out," she replied in flawless Russian. "We need to move now." They made it 3 blocks before the pursuit began. A Stasi patrol spotted them, raised the alarm. Suddenly, the night exploded with searchlights and shouting voices. Sparrow's enhanced mind processed the tactical situation instantly. 12 hostiles, 4 vehicles, multiple weapons. Extraction point 2 kilometers away. Probability of reaching it while protecting the defector. 12% through direct route. 68% through alternate route requiring elimination of 4 targets. She didn't feel fear. She didn't feel guilt about what she was about to do. She felt only the cold calculation of necessary actions. 3 minutes later, 4 Stasi officers lay dead in an alley. Sparrow and Volkov were racing through the sewers beneath East Berlin. By dawn, they were across the border. By afternoon, Volkov was being debriefed by CIA analysts while Sparrow prepared her after-action report. Director Carlyle read it with approval. Textbook execution. Welcome to Nightingale, Sparrow. Over the next 12 years, Sparrow completed 43 missions. Moscow, Prague, Bucharest, Havana, Beirut. Anywhere American interests were threatened by Soviet operations, Sparrow went. She eliminated threats. She gathered intelligence. She prevented catastrophes that would have made headlines if anyone had known they were about to happen. And through it all, the emotional regulator kept her functional, focused, effective. But there was one person who reached through that glass barrier. His code name was Falcon. His real name was Marcus Sullivan, and he was the only person who ever made Sparrow feel human again. What do you think about Eleanor's transformation so far? Can you imagine what it must have been like to become more machine than human? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and stay tuned because the next chapter reveals the dangerous love story that nearly destroyed everything Sparrow had become, and the mission that changed her life forever. Marcus Sullivan entered Eleanor's life, or rather Sparrow's life, in Prague during the winter of 1987. The Cold War was beginning its final desperate phase, though no one knew it yet. The Soviet Union was still a monolith of power, the Berlin Wall still stood, and operatives like Sparrow and Falcon were still conducting shadow wars in cities where ordinary people drank coffee and went to work, utterly unaware of the deadly chess game being played around them. Prague in winter was achingly beautiful. Snow covered the medieval architecture, turning the city into something from a fairy tale. Charles Bridge stretched across the Vltava River, its Baroque statues dusted white. The astronomical clock in Old Town Square chimed the hours while tourists and locals bundled in heavy coats hurried through cobblestone streets. But beneath that picturesque surface, Soviet intelligence controlled everything. The STB, Czechoslovakia's secret police, had informants everywhere. One wrong word in the wrong cafe could mean interrogation, imprisonment, or worse. Sparrow was there to meet a deep-cover asset. A Czech scientist named Pavel Kovar, who'd been feeding NATO information about Soviet nuclear weapons development. But Pavel had gone dark 3 weeks earlier. Either he'd been compromised, or he was preparing to deliver something so significant that he couldn't risk normal communication channels. The briefing had been straightforward. Extract Kovar and his research. If extraction fails, ensure the research is destroyed. Under no circumstances can it fall into Soviet hands. Sparrow had asked the obvious question, and if Kovar himself has been compromised? Director Carlyle's answer had been equally direct. Then he becomes a target, not an asset. She'd nodded. The emotional regulator kept her from feeling anything about that possibility. Pavel Kovar was a variable in an equation, nothing more. But this mission had a complication. She wouldn't be working alone. Falcon, Marcus Sullivan, and was already in Prague, having arrived 2 days earlier undercover as a British journalist. The plan was for them to coordinate the extraction, with Falcon providing surveillance and counterintelligence, while Sparrow made direct contact. They met for the first time in a safe house apartment in Mala Strana, the lesser town district on the west bank of the river. Sparrow arrived at precisely 1900 hours as scheduled. She climbed 3 flights of stairs in a building that smelled of cabbage and coal smoke, knocked twice, paused, then knocked 3 more times. The door opened. Marcus Sullivan was 32 years old, though his face carried the kind of weariness that added years. Dark hair, sharp features, grey eyes that assessed her instantly and completely. He wore casual clothes, jeans, a sweater, a jacket, but Sparrow's enhanced perception noted the subtle signs of his training. The way he positioned himself to maintain visual access to the stairwell, the micro-expressions that revealed constant threat assessment, the telltale bulge under his left arm where he carried a concealed weapon. "Sparrow, I presume," he said in English, accent neutral. "Falcon." She stepped inside, and he closed the door behind her. The apartment was sparse, a table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed in the corner, a window overlooking the street with curtains drawn. Marcus gestured to the table where maps and surveillance photographs were spread out. "I've been tracking Kovar's movements for 48 hours, he said, getting straight to business. "He's being watched. STB has a 2-person team on him at all times. They're being careful, rotating observers, varying distances. They suspect he's turned, but they haven't arrested him yet. They're using him as bait," Sparrow said immediately, "waiting to see who makes contact." "That's my assessment as well." Marcus pointed to a photograph of a man in his 50s leaving a university building. Pavel Kovar looked exactly like what he was, a physicist worried about survival. Thinning hair, wire-rimmed glasses, shoulders permanently stooped from years hunched over laboratory equipment. "Where's the research?" Sparrow asked. "That's the problem, we don't know. Kovar hasn't gone near any of his known dead drops. He's essentially living his normal life, apartment to university, university to cafe, cafe to apartment. If he has the research hidden, he's being extremely careful." Sparrow studied the maps. Her enhanced mind catalogued escape routes, surveillance blind spots, tactical opportunities. "We need to force the issue, make him break his pattern." "Agreed. But if we spook him into running, the STB will grab him immediately. Then we need to grab him first." Marcus looked at her with what might have been respect. "Direct extraction in the middle of Prague with STB surveillance active? That's exceptionally risky." "Risk is relative. What's the alternative? We could wait, see if he makes a move on his own." "Every day we wait is another day Soviet intelligence gets closer to figuring out what he knows." The briefing was clear. Priority is the research, not the asset. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're different from the other Nightingale operatives I've worked with." "How so?" "You're colder, more direct." He said it without judgment, just observation. Sparrow felt nothing about that assessment. It was accurate. "Is that a problem?" "No, it's actually refreshing. I've worked with agents who second-guess every decision, who let emotion compromise operational efficiency. You won't do that. The implants don't allow for it." "I know, I have them too." Marcus tapped his temple. "Generation 2 enhancements, neural processing boost, sensory augmentation, partial emotional regulation. Not as extensive as yours, but enough to understand what it's like." Something flickered in Sparrow's awareness. Not quite interest, but something adjacent to it. "How long have you been operational?" 4 years. 12 missions. Still getting used to thinking of myself as Falcon instead of Marcus." He smiled slightly. "Do you still think of yourself as Margaret?" The name hit her with unexpected force. Margaret Hayes, the woman she'd been before Nightingale. The woman who'd loved poetry and lazy Sunday mornings and the smell of autumn leaves. That person felt impossibly distant, like someone she'd known in a previous life. "No," Sparrow said, "that person doesn't exist anymore." "Maybe that's for the best." Marcus turned back to the maps. "Okay, if we're doing direct extraction, here's what I propose." They planned through the night. Marcus had a methodical mind that complemented Sparrow's enhanced analytical capabilities. By dawn, they had a strategy that had a 63% probability of success, better odds than most Nightingale operations. The extraction happened 2 days later. Pavel Kovar left his apartment at 7:30 in the morning, precisely on schedule. The STB surveillance team, 2 men in a grey Skoda, followed at a discreet distance. What they didn't notice was Sparrow, dressed as a university student, walking parallel to Kovar 1 street over. Or Marcus, positioned in a cafe with clear sightlines to the intersection where Kovar's route converged with a construction site. Sparrow's enhanced hearing picked up the construction noise, jackhammers, cement mixers, shouting workers. Perfect cover. She timed her approach to intersect with Kovar exactly as he passed the construction site. The collision looked accidental. Sparrow stumbled into Kovar, dropping her books, apologizing profusely in Czech. Kovar, polite and flustered, helped her gather the scattered papers. In those 5 seconds of contact, Sparrow pressed a note into his hand and whispered a single sentence. "British journalist, cafe on corner, 5 minutes." Then she was gone, disappearing into the morning crowd. Kovar continued walking, but his pattern had changed. The note had given him coordinates and a recognition phrase. He had a decision to make: Trust this contact or stay silent and hope the STB didn't come for him anyway. He chose trust. 5 minutes later, Kovar entered the cafe where Marcus sat reading a newspaper. The STB team was still outside, trying to figure out if something had just happened or if it was random chance. Marcus looked up as Kovar approached. "Excuse me, do you have the time?" Kovar's response matched the recognition phrase from the note. "My watch is broken. Do you know where I can get it repaired?" "There's a shop in Mala Strana. I can show you." They left together, two men engaged in casual conversation. The STB team debated whether to follow, but decided the journalist was harmless. By the time they realized their mistake, Kovar was in the safe house, and Sparrow had eliminated their communication capability by jamming their radio frequencies. Inside the safe house, Kovar collapsed into a chair. Thank God, I thought no one was coming." "We're here now," Marcus said. "Where's the research?" Kovar reached into his jacket and pulled out a small cylindrical object. "Microfilm. Everything I could gather about the Soviet hypersonic weapons program. Specifications, test results, deployment schedules. If NATO has this, you'll know exactly what you're facing." Sparrow took the microfilm and examined it. Authentic, as far as she could determine. "Why did you wait so long to make contact?" "Because they're watching everyone. The STB, the KGB, everyone. I couldn't risk it until—" He trailed off. "Until what?" Marcus asked. "Until they arrested my daughter." Kovar's voice broke. "Ludmila, she's 23. They took her 3 days ago. No charges, just took her. They said if I cooperate, they'll release her. If I don't—" Sparrow felt the emotional regulator processing this information, categorizing it as a complication rather than a tragedy. "That changes the extraction parameters. We can't take you out without confirmation of what you told them." "I told them nothing," Kovar insisted. "I swear." Marcus exchanged a glance with Sparrow. The unspoken question, was Kovar telling the truth or had he been turned? "Where is your daughter being held?" Sparrow asked. "Ruzhenya prison. They keep political prisoners there." Marcus shook his head. "We can't mount a prison rescue. That's beyond our operational scope." But Sparrow was already running calculations. Ruzhenya prison was a Soviet-era facility on the outskirts of Prague. High security, multiple guard rotations. Escape probability for a single trained operative, 8%. Escape probability for an operative with neural enhancements, 24%. Still terrible odds, but not impossible. "I can get her out," Sparrow said. Marcus stared at her. "That's suicide." "It's necessary. If we extract Kovar without his daughter, the Soviets will use her for leverage. He'll be compromised permanently." "Sparrow, listen to yourself. The mission is to extract Kovar and the research. We've done that. His daughter is not part of the objective." "Then we redefine the objective." Sparrow's voice was flat, emotionless. But somewhere beneath the regulator's control, something was pushing through, something that remembered being human. If we leave her, everything Kovar has risked becomes meaningless. Kovar looked between them with desperate hope. "Please, she's all I have. She doesn't know anything. She's innocent." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, conflict visible on his face even through his own emotional regulation. Finally, he looked at Sparrow. "If we do this, if we attempt a prison extraction, we'll need to coordinate with Langley. Get approval, resources. That will take days. The girl might not have days. So what are you suggesting?" Sparrow met his eyes. "We go tonight." What happened next would change everything between them. Marcus should have refused. Should have followed protocol, reported back to Director Carlyle, let the bureaucracy make the decision. But something in Sparrow's intensity, some ghost of humanity still visible beneath her enhanced exterior, made him nod. "Okay, we go tonight." The operation was insane. Ruzhenya prison sat like a concrete fortress, floodlights illuminating its perimeter walls, guard towers at each corner, patrols every 15 minutes. Inside 300 prisoners and enough military personnel to handle any disruption. Sparrow and Marcus approached from the east, where a drainage system provided partial cover. Her enhanced senses mapped the guard rotation patterns, identified blind spots in the camera coverage, calculated the precise timing needed to breach the perimeter. They moved like shadows. Marcus disabled the external alarm system, while Sparrow scaled the wall using equipment they'd acquired from a Nightingale weapons cache hidden in Prague. Once inside, they had approximately 7 minutes before the next patrol cycle. Finding Ludmila took 4 of those minutes. She was in a holding cell in the administrative wing, not with the general population, which meant the Stay-B was still deciding what to do with her. Sparrow picked the lock in 8 seconds, while Marcus maintained watch. Ludmila Kova was everything her father had described: young, terrified, innocent. When she saw them, dressed in black tactical gear, she screamed. Sparrow moved with inhuman speed, covering the girl's mouth. "We're here to help. Your father sent us. Stay quiet." Ludmila's eyes were wide with terror, but she nodded. Getting her out was harder than getting in. Ludmila wasn't trained for covert operations. She stumbled, made noise, nearly triggered a motion sensor. But Sparrow's enhanced reflexes compensated, pulling the girl out of danger again and again. They were 30 feet from the perimeter wall when the alarms finally sounded. "Run!" Marcus shouted. Searchlights swept across the yard. Guard dogs began barking. Voices shouted in Czech and Russian. Sparrow grabbed Ludmila, half carrying her toward the wall while Marcus provided covering fire. Not to kill, but to suppress and delay. They cleared the wall with seconds to spare, disappearing into the Prague night as the prison erupted in chaos behind them. Back at the safe house, Kovar embraced his daughter while sobbing with relief. Ludmila was shaking, traumatized but alive, and Sparrow stood by the window, watching the street for pursuit, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Satisfaction. Not the cold satisfaction of mission completion, something warmer, something dangerously human. Marcus stood beside her. "That was the most reckless thing I've ever done." "It was necessary." "No, it wasn't. Not strategically, not by any operational metric." He paused. "But it was right." Sparrow looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since the emotional regulator had been activated, she felt something break through the glass barrier. Connection. They extracted Kovar and his daughter through a series of safe houses over the next week, eventually getting them across the border into Austria and then to the United States. The microfilm proved invaluable. It accelerated NATO's understanding of Soviet weapons development by years. Director Carlyle debriefed them personally. "Exceptional work, both of you, though I note that the operation deviated significantly from the mission parameters." "The situation required adaptation," Sparrow said. Carlyle studied her. "Yes, it did." "Sparrow, you're developing something I didn't think was possible with the full emotional regulation package." "What's that, sir?" "Judgment that goes beyond calculation. It's concerning, but also valuable." He turned to Marcus. "Falcon, I'm assigning you as Sparrow's permanent partner. You work well together. The next 7 missions will be coordinated operations." Over those 7 missions spanning 3 years, Sparrow and Marcus became something neither of them had expected, a team that transcended operational efficiency. They saved each other's lives repeatedly. They completed impossible objectives. And slowly, incrementally, they became the closest thing either of them had to friends. But it was during their 8th mission together, in Moscow during the fall of 1989, that friendship became something more. They were in a safe house waiting for their extraction window when Marcus asked the question that had been building for months. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like, to be normal again?" Normal is a relative concept. You know what I mean. To feel things fully. To not have every emotion filtered through a neural regulator. Sparrow considered this. Sometimes, but feeling things fully is what makes people weak, vulnerable, or human. Marcus moved closer. "Sparrow, Margaret, I know we're not supposed to form attachments. I know it compromises operational security, but I need you to know that I—" He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Sparrow felt her emotional regulator struggling to process what was happening. The implants were designed to prevent exactly this kind of complication. But Marcus's presence created interference patterns in her neural network. She could feel emotions bleeding through the barriers, emotions she'd thought were permanently muted. "This is against protocol," she said softly. "I know." It could compromise both of us. I know, but I feel it too. They kissed. And for the first time in years, Sparrow felt completely, overwhelmingly human. Their relationship was impossible. Two operatives with neural enhancements conducting a romance in the shadows of the Cold War. They stole moments between missions, secret meetings in Berlin, a weekend in Vienna, coded messages that meant nothing to analysts but everything to them. For 2 years, they maintained the illusion that they could have both, their duty to Nightingale and their connection to each other. Then came the mission that destroyed everything. Berlin, November 1991. The wall had fallen 2 years earlier. The Soviet Union was collapsing, and Project Nightingale was being systematically terminated. Director Carlyle delivered the briefing himself. The Cold War is ending. Assets like you are no longer necessary. In fact, you're liabilities, witnesses to programs that officially never existed. What are you saying? Marcus asked. I'm saying that Nightingale is being shut down. All operatives will be decommissioned. Your enhancements will be partially deactivated. You'll be given new identities, relocated, and provided with sufficient resources to live comfortable civilian lives. And if we refuse? Sparrow asked. Carlyle's expression was grim. Then you become problems that need to be solved permanently. They had no choice. Over the next 6 months, 12 Nightingale operatives were brought in for decommissioning. The process was brutal. Neural implants couldn't be fully removed without causing catastrophic brain damage, but they could be shut down, lobotomized, rendered inert. Sparrow went through it first. Dr. Vasquez, older now but still brilliant, performed the procedure. I'm sorry, she whispered as Sparrow was sedated. I'm so sorry for what we did to you. When Sparrow woke up, she wasn't Sparrow anymore. She was Eleanor Hartwick. The neural enhancements were dormant. The emotional regulator was off. And for the first time in a decade, she felt everything. Terror, grief, joy, love, guilt, all of it, overwhelming and unfiltered. Marcus was scheduled for decommissioning the following week. They met one final time in a hotel in Virginia. No longer operatives, no longer enhanced, just two people trying to figure out how to be human again. They're sending me to Seattle, Marcus said. New identity, new life. They said we can't have contact. Ever. I know, I'm going to North Carolina, Asheville. They held each other, two former weapons, trying to remember how to be gentle. I love you, Marcus said. I know that's probably the implants wearing off, emotions flooding back, but I don't care. I love you. I love you too. Eleanor, not Sparrow, Eleanor now, felt tears on her face. Real tears. Will we ever see each other again? I don't know. Maybe in another life. They parted at dawn. Eleanor moved to Asheville and became a quiet widow. Marcus disappeared into his new identity in Seattle. For 23 years, Eleanor built a peaceful life. She gardened. She volunteered. She made friends. She slowly, painfully, learned how to be human again. But she never forgot Marcus, never forgot Sparrow, never forgot the missions that had cost her everything except her life. And now, sitting in her cottage in Asheville, holding a photograph of Marcus's dead body, Eleanor realized that the peace she'd built was an illusion. Someone was hunting Nightingale operatives, someone who knew about Protocol Omega, the final failsafe designed to eliminate all evidence of the program if it was ever at risk of exposure. Eleanor looked at her reflection in the darkened window. The face was older, softer, marked by years of ordinary life. But beneath that face, the implants were still there, dormant, waiting. She made a decision that terrified her. She was going to reactivate them. Thank you so much for staying with this story. I know it's intense, I know it's complicated, but I promise you the best is still to come. In the next chapter, Eleanor returns to Langley and discovers a conspiracy that goes deeper than anything she imagined. Who is really behind Protocol Omega? And can a decommissioned operative become a weapon again? Stay with me to find out. The flight to Washington, D.C. took 3 hours. Eleanor sat in coach, surrounded by business travelers and families heading to the nation's capital for tourism. She looked like any other elderly woman traveling alone. Sensible shoes, a cardigan, a paperback novel on her lap that she never opened. But inside her mind, something ancient and dangerous was waking up. The implants couldn't be fully reactivated without medical assistance, but Eleanor had discovered something during the flight. The neural pathways created by years of enhancement didn't simply disappear when the technology was shut down. They were still there, dormant, like muscle memory waiting to be triggered. She focused her thoughts, pushing against the barriers that had kept her merely human for 2 decades. It hurt. God, it hurt. Like forcing blood through arteries that had been closed for years. But gradually, incrementally, she felt the old systems beginning to respond. Her sensory perception sharpened. The conversations happening 3 rows behind her became clear. The pilot's announcements included subtle stress markers in his voice. He was worried about turbulence ahead. The woman across the aisle had elevated cortisol levels, probably afraid of flying. It wasn't full reactivation, but it was enough. Eleanor arrived at Dulles International Airport and took a taxi to an address she'd memorized 23 years ago and never forgotten. A townhouse in Georgetown, unremarkable from the outside, that served as one of Nightingale's emergency contact points. She knocked 3 times. Pause. 2 times. The door opened immediately. The woman standing there was in her 40s, athletic build, eyes that assessed Eleanor in microseconds. Authentication required. Eleanor spoke the code phrase in the constructed Nightingale cipher. The woman's expression didn't change, but she stepped aside to allow Eleanor entry. Inside, the townhouse looked like a normal residence. But Eleanor's partially reactivated senses detected the subtle signs of fortification, reinforced walls, encrypted communication equipment hidden in furniture, weapons caches behind false panels. "Sparrow 7 Delta," the woman said. "We were told you might come. Director Carlyle is waiting. Follow me." They descended through what appeared to be a wine cellar, but was actually an entrance to an underground facility. Tunnels extended beneath Georgetown, part of the Cold War-era infrastructure that had never been decommissioned. 5 minutes of walking brought them to a secure conference room. Director Thomas Carlyle sat at a table, looking decades older than when Eleanor had last seen him. He was in his 80s now, white-haired and frail, but his eyes were still sharp. "Eleanor," he said, "or do you prefer Sparrow?" "Eleanor, that's who I've been for 23 years. And yet you're here, which means you've decided to become Sparrow again." He gestured to a chair. "Sit, we have much to discuss." Eleanor sat. "Marcus is dead. So are others from Nightingale. Someone activated Protocol Omega." "Yes." "Who?" Carlyle sighed. "That's the question I've been trying to answer for the past 6 months. Protocol Omega was designed as a failsafe. If the Nightingale program was ever at risk of exposure, all operatives would be eliminated to protect national security. But I didn't activate it. No one in the current CIA leadership activated it, which means someone else gained access to the protocol. Someone inside the agency, or someone who used to be inside. Eleanor, when Nightingale was decommissioned, not everyone agreed with the decision. There were people who believed operatives like you were too valuable to simply retire, too dangerous to leave alive with all that knowledge and capability. Eleanor felt her partially reactivated neural systems processing this information, forming patterns, identifying implications. "You think someone from the old program is cleaning up loose ends?" "I think someone is eliminating Nightingale operatives systematically. Marcus was the 8th. Before him, Catherine Reeves in Boston, David Jang in Los Angeles, Patricia Winters in Houston, James Mitchell in Phoenix." He slid photographs across the table. Each showed a former operative dead. All made to look like accidents or natural causes, heart attacks, car crashes, home invasions gone wrong. Eleanor studied the photographs. These were people she'd known, people she'd worked with, warriors who'd given everything for their country and were now being erased like mistakes. "How many of us are left?" 12, including you, but the number drops every month. And you want me to stop whoever's doing this. I want you to survive, Eleanor, but yes, if you're willing, I want you to find out who's behind Protocol Omega and stop them before all the Nightingale operatives are dead. Eleanor looked at the photographs again. Marcus's face smiled at her from one of them, a candid shot from decades ago when he'd still been Falcon, when they'd still had hope. "What resources can you provide?" "Limited. Officially, this conversation never happened. Nightingale never existed. But I can give you access to classified databases, provide tactical support through secure channels, and reactivate your implants fully if you're willing to undergo the procedure. The reactivation process. Is Dr. Vasquez still alive? She is. 83 years old and still brilliant. She's been monitoring all surviving Nightingale operatives remotely, tracking the degradation of your neural systems. If anyone can safely reactivate your enhancements, it's her. Eleanor made the decision that would define the rest of her life. Do it. Reactivate me. All systems. Carlyle nodded slowly. You understand what you're agreeing to. Once those systems are back online, you won't be Eleanor Hartwick anymore. You'll be a weapon again. The emotional regulation, the enhanced cognition, all of it will return. The peaceful life you've built will be over. That life ended the moment I received Marcus's photograph. Eleanor's voice was steady. I'm already a weapon, Director. I'm just one that's been out of service for too long. The reactivation procedure took place in an underground medical facility beneath Langley. Dr. Helen Vasquez met Eleanor in the preparation room, and the two women regarded each other across decades of separation. Margaret, Dr. Vasquez said softly, I never thought I'd see you again. It's Eleanor now, and I never thought I'd be back here. I'm sorry for everything we did, for what we turned you into. Eleanor shook her head. You gave me the tools to save lives. Hundreds, maybe thousands of lives that would have been lost if operatives like me hadn't existed. Don't apologize for that. But the cost was mine to pay. Now I need those tools again. Dr. Vasquez guided her to a medical chair surrounded by scanning equipment and neural interface terminals. The implants never fully shut down. They've been in a dormant state for 23 years. Reactivating them is possible, but dangerous. Your neural tissue has aged. The integration won't be as clean as it was when you were younger. Will it work? It should, but you'll experience side effects. Memory bleed and past and present mixing together. Emotional volatility as the regulator comes back online. Possible system instabilities. I can handle it. The procedure took 6 hours. Eleanor lay in the chair while Dr. Vasquez and her team worked, sending activation codes through the dormant implant networks, coaxing decades-old technology back to life. Eleanor felt it happening in stages. First, the sensory enhancements came online. Sound became crisp, layered, three-dimensional. She could hear conversations in adjacent rooms, heartbeats of the medical staff, electrical hum of equipment throughout the facility. Vision sharpened to inhuman clarity. She could see the individual threads in Dr. Vasquez's lab coat from 10 feet away. Then the cognitive enhancements activated. Her thoughts accelerated, became more organized, more efficient. Problems that would have taken minutes to analyze now resolved in seconds. Memory retrieval became instantaneous. She could recall every moment of every mission with perfect clarity. And finally, the emotional regulator powered up. This was the hardest part. Eleanor felt her emotions. The grief over Marcus, the fear for the other operatives, the anger at whoever was hunting them, begin to recede behind the familiar glass barrier. Not eliminated, just managed, controlled, made useful instead of overwhelming. When it was complete, Eleanor, Sparrow, opened her eyes and sat up. Dr. Vasquez watched her nervously. How do you feel? Sparrow ran a diagnostic on her systems, checking response times and integration levels. Operational, all primary systems functioning at 87% capacity, acceptable parameters. The clinical response made Dr. Vasquez flinch. You sound like you did 23 years ago. Because I am what I was 23 years ago, a Nightingale operative. Sparrow stood, testing her balance and coordination. Enhanced, efficient, deadly. Where do I start? Director Carlyle entered the medical bay. We've identified the next probable target. His name is William Chen, codename Raven. He's living in San Francisco under a civilian identity. If the pattern holds, whoever's executing Protocol Omega will make a move on him within the next 72 hours. Then I need to get to San Francisco. Already arranged. You'll have full operational authority. Whatever resources you need, whatever actions you deem necessary. Your objective is to protect Chen, identify the hostile actors, and trace them back to whoever activated Protocol Omega. Sparrow processed this, her enhanced mind already formulating tactical approaches. I'll need weapons, communications equipment, access to surveillance networks. Everything will be provided. There's one more thing. Carlyle pulled out a file. We've analyzed the pattern of eliminations. The order isn't random. The operatives being targeted first are the ones who had the most extensive modifications, the highest mission counts, the deepest knowledge of Nightingale's operations. You're saying the killer is prioritizing the most dangerous targets? Yes, which means, after Chen, you're next on the list. Sparrow allowed herself a cold smile. Good. Let them come for me. It'll save me the trouble of hunting them. 12 hours later, Sparrow was in San Francisco. The city was experiencing one of its famous foggy evenings, the marine layer rolling in from the Pacific and turning the streets into something atmospheric and dreamlike. Sparrow moved through the Mission District, her enhanced senses mapping the urban environment with tactical precision. William Chen, Raven, lived in a modest apartment above a Vietnamese restaurant. According to his file, he'd been a Nightingale operative for 6 years before decommissioning. Specialization, infiltration and sabotage. He'd destroyed 3 Soviet weapons facilities and prevented 2 assassination attempts on American diplomats. Now he worked as an accountant and played tennis on weekends. Sparrow had been surveilling his apartment for 3 hours when she detected the threat. 2 operatives, professional, moving with the kind of discipline that indicated serious training. They approached Chen's building from opposite directions, timing their movements to converge simultaneously. Sparrow's tactical assessment was instant. These weren't CIA. The equipment was wrong, the methodology slightly off. Private contractors, well-funded, expertly trained, but not government. She moved to intercept. The first operative never saw her coming. Sparrow struck from behind, a precise blow to the neural cluster that induced unconsciousness without causing permanent damage. The second operative turned, weapon rising, but Sparrow was faster. She disarmed him, broke his wrist and had him on the ground in under 3 seconds. "Who sent you?" she demanded. The operative's face showed shock and pain, but also recognition. "Sparrow? You're supposed to be retired." "Clearly not. Answer the question." "Go to hell." Sparrow applied pressure to a nerve cluster. The operative screamed. "I don't have time for this. Who activated Protocol Omega?" "I don't know. We just get the contracts, target locations, payment schedules, no names." "How do you receive the contracts?" "Encrypted platform, dark web, untraceable." Sparrow processed this. A dead end, but valuable information nonetheless. Someone was using private contractors to execute Nightingale operatives, maintaining operational distance and plausible deniability. She zip-tied both operatives and called for extraction. Then she went upstairs to Chen's apartment and knocked. William Chen answered the door cautiously. He was in his 60s, still fit but showing his age. When he saw Sparrow, his expression went through a rapid series of changes. Confusion, recognition, fear. "Sparrow? Margaret? You need to come with me. Someone just tried to kill you." Chen looked past her to the hallway, where the sounds of a scuffle had occurred minutes earlier. "Protocol Omega?" "Yes, how many others know about it?" "Everyone from Nightingale knew. It was part of our briefing package. If the program was ever compromised, all operatives would be eliminated to protect national security." He grabbed a jacket. "I've been expecting this for years. Honestly surprised it took this long." They left through the back exit. Sparrow had a car waiting 2 blocks away. As they drove through San Francisco's foggy streets, Chen asked the question that had been building since he'd seen her face. "You got reactivated, didn't you? Full systems?" "Yes." "How does it feel? Being a weapon again?" Sparrow considered this. Through the emotional regulator, she felt the question's complexity without being overwhelmed by it. "Familiar, necessary. Right." "I sometimes miss it," Chen admitted. "Being Raven, having purpose, knowing exactly what you're supposed to do and having the tools to do it." He looked at his hands. "Now I spend my days auditing spreadsheets and my nights wondering if this is really what I survived all those missions for." "You survived so you could live. That's not nothing, isn't it? What's the point of living if you're not really alive?" It was a question Sparrow didn't have an answer for. They reached the safe house, another CIA black site hidden in plain sight, this time in a warehouse near the Oakland docks. Carlyle was waiting with additional intelligence. "We've made progress," he said. "The two operatives Sparrow captured had communication equipment. Our tech team cracked it. The contracts are being issued through a shell company called Sentinel Solutions. It's buried under about 15 layers of corporate obfuscation, but we traced it back to a retired CIA officer named Raymond Kowalski." Sparrow's enhanced memory instantly recalled the name. Lieutenant Colonel Kowalski. He was the tactical operations director for Nightingale. Yes, and apparently he never agreed with the decision to decommission the program. We think he's been planning this for decades, waiting for the right moment to eliminate all Nightingale operatives and erase any evidence the program ever existed. Why now? Why wait 23 years? Because the political climate has changed. Congressional oversight committees are investigating Cold War-era intelligence programs. Journalists are filing Freedom of Information requests. Kowalski probably realized it was only a matter of time before someone uncovered Nightingale. Better to erase all witnesses while he still could. Chen spoke up. "Where is Kowalski now?" "That's the problem. He's off the grid. No digital footprint for the past 6 months. We think he's orchestrating everything from a secure location, using contractors as his operational arm." Sparrow's tactical mind was already formulating a plan. He has to communicate with the contractors somehow. If we can intercept that communication, we can trace it back to his location. Already working on it. But Sparrow, there's something else. Carlyle pulled up a file on his tablet. "We've identified the next target after Chen, someone Kowalski considers extremely high priority." "Who?" Carlyle turned the tablet around. Sparrow was looking at her own file, her own photograph, her own name. "He's coming for you next, and based on the contract amount being offered, he wants you dead more than any other Nightingale operative." Sparrow studied her own file with detached interest. "Then we use that. Set a trap. Let him think I'm vulnerable, draw out his contractors and trace them back to Kowalski. That's exceptionally dangerous. It's also the fastest way to end this." Sparrow looked at the faces around her. Carlyle, Chen, Dr. Vasquez, who'd just entered the room. Former colleagues, former friends, people who'd become shadows of what they once were. "How many more operatives have to die before we stop this? Marcus is gone. 8 others are gone. I won't let the rest of you die because someone decided we're inconvenient witnesses." Chen nodded. "I'm in. Raven might be retired, but I remember how to fight." Dr. Vasquez spoke quietly. "If you're going to confront Kowalski, you'll need to be at full operational capacity. I can enhance the reactivation, push your systems beyond their original parameters. It'll be taxing on your body, but you'll have every advantage." "Do it," Sparrow said. The plan was brutally simple. Sparrow would return to Asheville and resume her normal life, making herself a visible target. She would leak her location through channels that Kowalski's contractors were monitoring, and when they came for her, she would be ready. But this time, she wouldn't just defend, she would attack. Follow the contractors back to their source, find Kowalski, and end Protocol Omega permanently. The enhanced reactivation procedure took another 6 hours. Dr. Vasquez pushed the implants beyond their original specifications, overclocking the neural processors, maximizing the sensory augmentation, fine-tuning the emotional regulator to hair trigger sensitivity. When Sparrow emerged from the medical bay, she was operating at levels that made her original Nightingale configuration look primitive. She could process tactical scenarios 15% faster. Her combat reflexes were nearly precognitive. Her ability to read micro-expressions and body language allowed her to predict hostile intent before it manifested as action. She was, quite literally, the most dangerous person in the building. "How long can I maintain this level of enhancement?" she asked Dr. Vasquez. "Unknown, days, possibly weeks, but there will be degradation, neural fatigue, system crashes. Your brain wasn't designed to operate at this intensity." "But it'll be enough." "For what you're planning?" "Yes. You'll be faster, stronger, and smarter than anyone Kowalski sends against you. Just remember, You're still human underneath all that technology. Don't forget that. Sparrow nodded, but privately she wondered if that was still true. After decades of enhancement, after reactivation, after pushing beyond human limitations, was there enough of Margaret Hayes left to matter, or had she finally, completely become Sparrow? She returned to Asheville the next day. Her cottage looked exactly as she'd left it. The lavender still needed trimming. The neighbors still waved cheerfully. Patricia Chen walked her golden retriever. The world continued its peaceful rotation. Utterly unaware that a former government weapon had returned to walk among them, Sparrow resumed her routine. Library volunteering on Tuesday, grocery shopping on Thursday, garden work every morning. To anyone watching, she was Eleanor Hartwick, harmless retiree, but every movement was calculated. Every interaction was surveillance. She'd turned her entire life into bait. 3 days passed, then 4. On the 5th night, Sparrow's enhanced hearing detected the approach of vehicles. 2 SUVs, engines deliberately quiet, parking 3 blocks away. They were here. 6 contractors, moving with professional precision through the darkness, surrounding her cottage, preparing for a coordinated breach. Sparrow stood in her kitchen, appearing relaxed, vulnerable. In reality, her enhanced systems were tracking each hostile through their thermal signatures, mapping their movement patterns, calculating optimal response sequences. They breached simultaneously. Front door, back door, 2 windows, flashbangs deployed, smoke grenades. The kind of overwhelming force designed to disorient and incapacitate, but Sparrow had been expecting exactly this. She moved through the smoke like a ghost, her enhanced vision piercing the obscurity easily. The first contractor went down from a strike to the carotid artery, unconscious before his body hit the floor. The second managed to raise his weapon, but caught a knife hand to the throat that crushed his larynx without killing him. The 3rd through 6th contractors died harder. They were better trained, better equipped, but they were fighting a weapon that had been designed to kill people exactly like them. 4 minutes later, the smoke cleared. 5 contractors lay unconscious or incapacitated. The 6th was zip-tied to a chair in Eleanor's kitchen, facing a woman who'd just dismantled his entire team without breaking a sweat. "You're going to tell me how to contact Kowalski," Sparrow said calmly. The contractor's face showed genuine fear. "You're not supposed to be able to do that. The files said you were decommissioned." "The files were wrong. Now tell me what I need to know, or I'll start breaking bones until you do." The contractor talked. 30 minutes later, Sparrow had everything she needed. Kowalski's location, his communication protocols, his next target. The entire operational structure laid bare because one overconfident contractor had underestimated exactly what a reactivated Nightingale operative could accomplish. She made one phone call to Director Carlyle. "I have Kowalski's location. Sending you the coordinates now. Assemble a team. We end this tonight." But Carlyle's response stopped her cold. "Sparrow, we have a problem. While you were dealing with the contractors, Kowalski made his move. He's not targeting individual operatives anymore. He's going after all of them simultaneously. Every surviving Nightingale operative received a message 30 minutes ago. It's a trap. He's lured them all to a single location." "Where?" "The original Nightingale facility, the underground complex in Virginia where you were all created. He's going to eliminate everyone at once and destroy the facility, erasing all evidence." Sparrow felt the emotional regulator processing this information, categorizing the threat, formulating responses. How many operatives have responded to his message? 8, including Chen. They're walking into a kill box. Then I need to get there first. Sparrow, it's a 4-hour drive. Even if you leave now, you won't make it in time. But Sparrow was already moving, grabbing equipment, loading weapons. Then I'll have to be faster than time allows. As she ran to her car, leaving the unconscious contractors for local law enforcement to find, Sparrow felt something she hadn't felt in decades. Urgency that transcended tactical calculation, fear that broke through the emotional regulator, determination that was purely, desperately human, because somewhere in that facility, walking into Kowalski's trap, were the last remnants of Project Nightingale, the last people who understood what she'd been, what she'd done, what she'd sacrificed. And if she couldn't save them, then Marcus's death and all the others would be meaningless. The story is almost at its end, but I need you to stay with me just a little longer, because what happens at the Nightingale facility will determine not just whether these operatives survive, but whether Eleanor or Sparrow can finally find peace after decades of war. If you've made it this far, you're invested in this story, and that means you should absolutely subscribe to this channel and hit that like button so you don't miss the incredible stories we have coming. Now let's finish this together. The Nightingale facility looked abandoned. 30 years of neglect had reclaimed the Virginia mountainside where it was hidden. Trees grew over the entrance tunnel. Vines covered the concrete blast doors. To anyone passing by, and few people ever did in this remote corner of the state, it looked like nothing more than a forgotten Cold War relic. But beneath that overgrowth, deep underground, the facility still existed, and tonight it would become a tomb or a turning point. Sparrow arrived at 2200 hours. She'd made the drive in 3 hours and 17 minutes, pushing her vehicle and her reflexes to their absolute limits. Now she stood at the tree line, her enhanced vision piercing the darkness, mapping the facility's perimeter. She detected them immediately. Contractors, at least 20, positioned in overlapping fields of fire around every entrance. This wasn't just a trap. It was an execution ground. Her communications device crackled. Director Carlyle's voice tense with urgency. "Sparrow, status. I'm here. Kowalski has the place locked down. 20+ hostiles, military-grade equipment. The other operatives haven't arrived yet." "Yes, they have. They went in through the original tunnel entrance 40 minutes ago. They're already inside." Sparrow's enhanced mind immediately calculated the implications. Then this isn't just an ambush, it's a siege. Kowalski is going to seal them inside and destroy the facility. "That's our assessment. Sparrow, I'm sending tactical support. ETA 90 minutes. They'll be dead in 90 minutes. Then you need to wait. You can't assault 20 contractors alone, even with your enhancements." But Sparrow was already moving, disappearing into the forest, circling toward the facility's secondary access point, one that few people knew existed because it had been built for emergency extraction scenarios that were never supposed to happen. "I'm not assaulting 20 contractors," she said quietly into her comm. "I'm removing obstacles between me and my objective." What happened next would become legendary in the small circle of intelligence professionals who would eventually learn about it. Sparrow moved through the perimeter like a surgical strike personified. She didn't engage the contractors directly. She was smarter than that. Instead, she used their own tactics against them. The first pair she encountered were maintaining surveillance on the north approach. Sparrow eliminated them, using a technique that left them unconscious for at least 6 hours, long enough to be irrelevant. She took their communications equipment, their weapons, and continued. The second team was more alert, more professional. But they were expecting an assault from outside, not an infiltrator who moved with superhuman precision. Sparrow neutralized them before they could raise an alarm, using their own equipment to send false status reports to their command structure. By the time she reached the secondary access point, she'd eliminated or bypassed 15 contractors without firing a single shot. The remaining 5 were clustered around the main entrance, focused on preventing escape rather than detecting infiltration. The secondary access was hidden beneath a false boulder. Sparrow cleared the debris, entered the authentication code, still functional after 3 decades, and descended into the facility that had created her. The underground complex was exactly as she remembered. Sterile corridors, reinforced doors, the faint hum of backup generators that had somehow remained operational, but now it felt different, not threatening, just sad. A monument to Cold War paranoia and the human cost of desperate security measures. Her enhanced hearing detected voices ahead, multiple speakers, arguing. Sparrow moved toward the sound and found them in what used to be the main briefing room. 8 former Nightingale operatives standing amid equipment that had been used to transform them into weapons decades ago. William Chen, Raven, saw her first. "Sparrow, thank God, we thought—" "It's a trap," Sparrow interrupted. "Kowalski has contractors outside. This entire facility is wired to collapse. He's not trying to kill you individually. He's trying to erase Nightingale completely." A woman in her 60s spoke up, Catherine Moore, codename Hawk. We figured that out about 20 minutes ago. Found the demolition charges, professional work, probably £5,000 of C4 distributed throughout the support structure. Can we disarm them? Not without triggering a failsafe. Kowalski thought this through. Either we die in the blast, or we try to escape and get cut down by his contractors outside. Another voice, male, bitter. So we're right back where we started. Weapons that served our purpose now being disposed of because we're inconvenient. Sparrow looked at the faces around her. These were people who'd given everything, who'd let their humanity be carved away in service of national security, who'd become legends that could never be acknowledged. And now they were going to die in the same facility that had created them, unless she did something about it. There's a third option, Sparrow said. We go on offense. Chen raised an eyebrow. Against 20 contractors and an unknown number of backup personnel, with what resources? With what we are, with what we were trained to be. Sparrow moved to the equipment lockers that lined one wall. They were rusted shut, but her enhanced strength ripped them open easily. Inside, weapons, body armor, tactical gear from the 1980s that somehow remained functional. Kowalski made a critical error, Sparrow continued. He's treating us like civilians he needs to eliminate. He's forgotten that we're Nightingale operatives. We don't run from threats. We eliminate them. Hawk smiled grimly. Our implants are decommissioned. We're not operating at combat capacity. Then we'll have to be smart instead of enhanced. Sparrow started distributing weapons. Chen, you specialized in sabotage. Can you access the facility's old electrical systems? Probably. Why? Because we're going to use Kowalski's own trap against him. We can't disarm the charges, but we can control when they detonate, and we can use the facility's ventilation system to our advantage. For the next 20 minutes, the former operatives planned. It wasn't the carefully calculated tactical analysis that enhanced implants would have provided. It was human intelligence, creative, adaptive, occasionally brilliant. Chen worked on the electrical systems. Hawk and 2 others positioned themselves at strategic choke points. The remaining operatives prepared improvised defenses using equipment that had been designed to create super soldiers, but could be repurposed into very effective weapons, and Sparrow prepared to do what she'd always done best, eliminate threats. The assault began at 2300 hours. Sparrow triggered a fire alarm, still functional after 3 decades. The contractors outside responded exactly as trained, sending a team to investigate. When they entered through the main access tunnel, they walked into a kill zone that Chen had prepared using the facility's old security systems. Electromagnetic pulse weapons, originally designed for testing operative resilience, fried their communications and targeting systems. Automated door locks trapped them in sections of corridor, and then the operatives went to work, using non-enhanced human skill to neutralize contractors who'd expected to fight elderly retirees. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't easy, but it was effective. Sparrow personally eliminated 7 contractors, moving through the facility with the kind of tactical precision that did not require neural enhancements, just decades of experience and a complete willingness to do whatever was necessary. By midnight, the contractors were either eliminated, incapacitated, or had retreated to regroup. The facility was secure, but the demolition charges were still active, and they were running out of time. Kowalski has to be close, Sparrow said. He'll want to witness this, to make sure Nightingale is truly ended. Chen pointed to the security monitors he'd managed to reactivate. There, quarter-mile northeast, vehicle with active communications array. That has to be his command post. Sparrow studied the monitor. 1 vehicle, probably armored, definitely fortified, and inside the man who'd decided that the operatives who'd served their country deserved to be erased like mistakes. Sparrow. I'm going after him, she said. Hawk moved to follow. Not alone, you're not. Yes, alone. You're needed here to evacuate the others once I've dealt with Kowalski. Get them out, get them safe, that's the mission. Chen looked at her for a long moment. You're not coming back, are you? Sparrow considered lying. But these were people who'd lived in shadows and deception their entire operational lives. They deserved truth. I don't know. But Kowalski needs to answer for what he's done. And if stopping him means I don't make it out, that's acceptable. Sparrow. My name is Eleanor, she interrupted quietly. It's been Eleanor for 23 years. I want you to remember that when this is over. Then she was gone, moving through the facility toward the surface, toward confrontation, toward whatever ending awaited. Kowalski's command post was exactly where Chen had identified, an armored Suburban with communications equipment, surrounded by 4 remaining contractors who looked increasingly nervous as they realized their companions weren't responding to radio calls. Sparrow approached from downwind, using terrain and darkness to mask her movement. Her enhanced systems were beginning to show signs of degradation. Dr. Vasquez's warning about neural fatigue was manifesting as occasional sensory glitches and processing delays, but she had enough capability left for this final mission. The 4 contractors went down fast. Sparrow didn't kill them, didn't need to. Unconscious was sufficient. Then she approached the Suburban and knocked on the bulletproof window. Inside, Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Kowalski looked at her with an expression that mixed shock, fear, and something like admiration. He was in his 80s, white-haired and distinguished-looking, the kind of man you'd trust with national secrets, the kind of man who'd decided those secrets were worth more than the people who'd protected them. He opened the door slowly, hands visible. Sparrow. Or should I say Eleanor Hartwick? You activated Protocol Omega. I did what was necessary. Nightingale was always meant to be temporary, assets with a defined operational lifespan. When the program ended, all of you should have been terminated then. Carlyle was weak. He let you live, gave you new identities, pretended you could just retire and be normal. We were people, not assets. You stopped being people the moment you accepted those implants. You became weapons, and weapons don't get to choose when they're decommissioned. Sparrow felt her emotional regulator struggling. Anger was bleeding through, hot and righteous and utterly human. Marcus Sullivan was a person, a good person. He saved lives. He made the world safer. And you had him killed like he was nothing. He was a security risk. All of you are. One congressional investigation, one determined journalist, and Nightingale gets exposed. Do you know what that would mean? The lawsuits, the international incidents, the damage to intelligence operations that are still ongoing? Better that a dozen operatives die quietly than thousands of ongoing operations get compromised. So you decided to play God. I decided to protect American national security. The same thing all of you did when you volunteered for Nightingale. Sparrow was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into the vehicle and pulled Kowalski out, holding him against the side of the Suburban with one hand. Her enhanced strength made the elderly man feel weightless. Here's what's going to happen, she said. You're going to deactivate those demolition charges. Then you're going to surrender to Director Carlyle. You're going to confess to everything you've done, and you're going to accept whatever punishment is decided. Kowalski laughed. Actually laughed. Or what? You'll kill me? You can't. You're still bound by operational protocols. Nightingale operatives don't kill American citizens without authorization. Sparrow held his gaze. You're right. I can't kill you. She released him. But I don't need to. Because there's something worse than death waiting for you. She reached into the Suburban and pulled out the communications equipment. With a few quick commands, she transmitted every file Kowalski had compiled. Mission reports, expenditure records, kill orders. Every piece of evidence about Protocol Omega sent directly to Director Carlyle, to congressional oversight committees, to 3 different journalists who specialized in intelligence reporting. What did you do? Kowalski's face went pale. I exposed you. Everything you've done, everyone you've killed, sent to people who'll make sure the world knows exactly what Raymond Kowalski did to American heroes who trusted him. Sparrow stepped back. You wanted to erase Nightingale. Congratulations, you've made us famous, and you've destroyed yourself in the process. Kowalski stared at the communications equipment like it was a live grenade. You can't. This will compromise ongoing operations. No, it'll compromise you. The intelligence community will deny everything except your involvement. You'll be the lone bad actor, the rogue officer who went too far, and you'll spend whatever time you have left knowing that you failed. Behind them, the underground facility suddenly came alive with light. emergency vehicles, federal agents. Director Carlyle had arrived with his tactical support team. Carlyle approached, looked at Kowalski, then at Sparrow. "Is it done?" "It's done. The contractors are neutralized, the surviving operatives are safe, and Colonel Kowalski has just confessed to multiple murders via the files I transmitted." Carlyle nodded to his team, who moved to arrest Kowalski. As they led him away, the old man looked back at Sparrow one final time. "You're still a weapon," he said. "Decommissioning you was always the right choice." Sparrow watched him go. Then she felt her legs give out. Dr. Vasquez was there instantly, supporting her, guiding her to sit. "Neural cascade failure. I warned you this would happen. Your implants are overheating." "The others?" Sparrow asked. "They're fine. All 8 survivors evacuated safely. You saved them, Eleanor." Eleanor. The name felt right now. The enhancements were failing. The emotional regulator was offline and she was feeling everything. Exhaustion, relief, grief, satisfaction, all at once, without filters or controls. "Marcus," she whispered. "I couldn't save Marcus." "No, but you avenged him. You stopped the person who killed him and prevented anyone else from dying. That counts for something." Dr. Vasquez worked quickly, injecting stabilizers, monitoring Eleanor's neural activity. "We need to get you to a medical facility. The implants are shutting down, this time permanently." "Good," Eleanor said. "I don't want to be Sparrow anymore. I just want to be Eleanor." The next week passed in a blur of medical procedures, debriefings, and recovery. The implants were carefully dismantled in a way that preserved Eleanor's natural neural function while removing the enhancement systems. It was delicate work, but Dr. Vasquez had spent 30 years preparing for this possibility. When it was over, Eleanor Hartwick was truly just Eleanor Hartwick. No enhancements, no emotional regulation, no superhuman capabilities, just a 72-year-old woman who'd lived an extraordinary life and survived to tell about it. Kowalski's arrest became a classified scandal. He was charged with multiple counts of murder, conspiracy, and abuse of government resources. The trial, such as it was, happened behind closed doors. He was convicted and sentenced to life in a federal prison that officially didn't exist. Protocol Omega was permanently deactivated. The files were sealed. Nightingale was officially acknowledged in classified documents as a Cold War program that had ended with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and the surviving operatives were given a choice. Director Carlyle met with each of them individually. "You can go back to your civilian lives with enhanced security and financial support, or you can work with us in a consulting capacity, helping train the next generation, providing institutional knowledge, ensuring that the mistakes of Nightingale are never repeated." Eleanor chose the first option. She'd had enough of being a weapon. 3 months later, she was back in Asheville. Her cottage had been repaired after the contractor attack. The garden had been maintained by well-meaning neighbors. Life had continued its peaceful rotation, but something was different now. Eleanor found herself connecting with people in ways she hadn't before. She joined a book club, started volunteering at a veterans support center, began teaching self-defense classes at the community center, modified techniques that didn't require enhancement, but were still highly effective. And one Tuesday morning, while she was trimming her lavender, a car pulled up to her cottage. William Chen stepped out. He looked different, lighter somehow, less burdened. "Eleanor," he said, "or do you prefer Margaret?" "Eleanor is fine." "William?" "Chen, actually. I decided to reclaim my original name." He gestured to the garden. "This is nice. Peaceful." "It is. Would you like some tea?" They sat on her porch, 2 former weapons enjoying the morning sun. "The others are doing well," Chen said. "Hawk started a security consulting firm. Moore is writing a memoir, heavily redacted, obviously, but still cathartic. Patterson is teaching martial arts. We're all finding ways to be human again." "That's good. That's really good. We wanted to thank you for saving us, for stopping Kowalski, for remembering that we were people, not just assets." Eleanor shook her head. "I didn't save you alone. We saved each other. That's what people do." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Chen asked the question that had been building. "Do you regret it? Nightingale, everything we did. Eleanor considered this carefully. I regret what it cost. The relationships I couldn't have, the years I lost to being someone else, the friends who died. But I don't regret the missions. We saved lives. We prevented catastrophes. We did things that needed doing, even though no one will ever thank us. Especially because no one will ever thank us. That's what service means. Doing what's right without expectation of recognition. Chen smiled. You sound like Marcus. He used to say things like that. The mention of Marcus brought a familiar ache, but it was manageable now. Human grief, not regulated away or suppressed, just present, real. He was a good man, Eleanor said softly. He was, and he would have been proud of what you did, saving the others, exposing Kowalski, choosing to be Eleanor instead of Sparrow. They finished their tea. Chen prepared to leave. Will you stay in Asheville? He asked. I think so. It's home now. Real home, not just a cover identity. Eleanor looked at her cottage, her garden, the street where neighbors walked dogs and children played. For the first time in decades, I'm not hiding. I'm just living. That's all any of us wanted, to just live. After Chen left, Eleanor returned to her garden. She worked through the afternoon, planting new flowers, trimming hedges, preparing her small corner of the world for the coming season. Patricia Chen walked by with her golden retriever. Beautiful day, Eleanor. It is, Patricia. It really is. And for the first time since Margaret Hayes had become Sparrow, all those decades ago, Eleanor Hartwick felt completely, genuinely, wonderfully at peace. She was no longer a weapon, no longer a spy, no longer anything except what she chose to be. She was Eleanor, just Eleanor, and that was enough. The sun set over Asheville that evening, painting the Blue Ridge Mountains in shades of gold and amber. Eleanor sat on her porch, a cup of tea cooling in her hands, and thought about the life she'd lived, the missions she'd completed, the people she'd saved, the impossible things she'd done in service of ideals she still believed in. But most of all, she thought about the future, about the book club meeting on Thursday, about the self-defense class she was teaching on Saturday, about the normal, ordinary, beautiful life she'd finally earned the right to live. Somewhere, in classified files that would remain sealed for decades, the story of Sparrow 7 Delta would exist as a testament to what people could become when national security demanded the impossible. But here on this porch, in this cottage, in this peaceful southern city, only Eleanor existed, and Eleanor was finally truly free. We've journeyed through one of the most incredible stories of sacrifice, transformation, and redemption. Eleanor Hartwick, once Sparrow 7 Delta, once a weapon designed to operate in the darkest shadows of the Cold War, found her way back to humanity. She saved her fellow operatives. She stopped a conspiracy that would have erased them all. And most importantly, she chose peace over vengeance, life over legacy. But now I want to hear from you. What part of Eleanor's journey resonated with you most? Was it her transformation into a weapon, her love story with Marcus, or her final choice to embrace humanity? Drop your comments below and tell me your name, your city, and your state. I love knowing where our incredible audience is watching from. If this story moved you, if it made you think about sacrifice and service and the true meaning of heroism, then please subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who appreciates powerful storytelling. Because we have more stories like this coming. Stories about real people who lived extraordinary lives, who made impossible choices, who changed the world in ways that will never make headlines. And before you go, make sure to check out the next video that's appearing on your screen right now. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about Eleanor's story. And thank you for being part of this community that celebrates the incredible, the unexpected, and the deeply human stories that remind us what we are capable of when we choose courage over comfort. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and remember, every ordinary life might be hiding an extraordinary story.